I'm Molly, a 38-year-old with a husband named Bill. Now, Bill is the eldest of 3 brothers. His younger siblings, Mike and Drew, are both married with a kid each. They're both good as gold. Same goes for their wives. Honestly, they're the sweetest. You hear about in-law drama, but not in my life. I've lucked out with a great bunch and we all get along just fine. There is a fly in the ointment, though, my mother-in-law. When Bill and I tied the knot, she was a delight. Julia, she's called, always with a friendly smile. I thought I hit the jackpot with her as a mother-in-law. My father-in-law, who's since passed away, was also around when Bill and I got hitched. He was a real gem, too. I remember thinking just how lucky I was to marry into such a great family. However, a few years into our marriage, Mike and Drew both got hitched, and before long, both their wives were expecting. That's when the winds shifted with Julia. It began with small things. Bill and I were living in an apartment just a hop, skip, and a jump away from his parents, and we'd pop by regularly. One day, out of the blue, the coffee they used to serve me just stopped. I thought maybe Julia had simply forgotten, so I asked her, "Could you pour me a cup of coffee?" Her response was a harsh, "Don't ask every time. Think for yourself. You're so intrusive." I never heard such words from her before. It knocked me for 6, and all I could muster was an apology. Looking back, I think that might have been the starting point. Julia began pointing fingers at me for not having a child and started being outright mean. And Bill? Not a word against him. She seemed to coddle him even more. Maybe he liked being the apple of his mother's eye, but he turned a blind eye to the way I was being treated. Whenever I sought help, he'd act as if nothing was amiss. This ordeal went on for years. Then one day, we were celebrating Lena's 4th birthday, Mike's little girl. We were all getting together at my in-laws for a birthday bash. As we pulled up with gifts in tow, we found everyone else was already there. In a tone feigning concern, Julia asked Bill, "You're late. Are you okay?" When I piped up, "I'm sorry, the rows were busy," she retorted, "I wasn't asking you. I bet you were just slow getting ready. Don't bother my son. Your makeup doesn't change a thing." Her words took the wind out of my sails. Bill saw it all, but as always didn't lift a finger and made a beeline for the house. You'd think he could say something, anything. Holding on to that vain hope, I trailed after him. As we stepped into the room, the gang was all there, and Lena, the birthday girl and star of the day, darted over to me, beaming. Molly!" As I wished her a happy birthday, she replied, "Thanks for coming," with an innocent smile. And for a moment, my heart found a little peace. Just then, Julia, who clearly wasn't too thrilled about my chat with Lena, muttered under her breath, "Quit gabbing and start helping with the prep, would ya?" I mumbled an apology and made a beeline for the kitchen. There I found Nicole, my sister-in-law, and mom to little Lena. Drew's wife, the newest addition to our family, had to bail due to some unavoidable stuff she had going on today. "Hey Nicole, sorry I'm late. Need a hand?" I asked. She waved it off, saying, "No worries. Julia said we're getting Uber Eats today, so we just needed to get 8 plates. I've got it covered, so you can chill." I thought there'd be heaps to do. Guess Julia was just cheesed off that I was having a blast with Lena. Together, Nicole and I carried the plates and cutlery to the table and got it ready for the family. That's when Julia decided to drop her surprise. "The Uber Eats is here with some roast beef. Since it's Lena's big day, I thought we could splash out a bit," she said, looking rather chuffed. We served the roast beef and bam, we were ready to roll. Everyone started taking their seats as per Julia's seating chart. Bill, my husband, found his seat next to Mike, so I tried to slide in next to him, but Julia was quick to intervene. Hold your horses, Molly. Bill's next to Mike. You can't sit there. I was flummoxed. Where should I sit then? I asked, but she didn't say anything. In the end, I was left standing like a lemon. After a bit, Julia was all, well, shall we dig in? But I was still on my feet, and for some weird reason, there wasn't a roast beef in sight for me. Julia, where do I tried to ask, but she interjected. Oh, you're still there. I forgot. Grab any spot that's free, okay? Hearing this, I plonked down at the very last seat, but there was just a small plate and a fork. No roast beef. I had a sinking feeling, but still took a shot. Julia, I'm missing a roast beef. Oh, looks like I messed up the count when I ordered. My bad, Molly. How about some mac and cheese? She suggested, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Mac and cheese? I echoed, baffled. Yeah, we've got some leftovers from last night in the fridge. Just zap it in the microwave, she said casually. I was taken aback, but Julia, as chill as ever, called out, Let's eat, and started tucking in. Everyone else seemed a bit gobsmacked, but even Bill started carving into his meat. I sighed and heated up the leftover mac and cheese and dug in. Just then, Nicole, who was sat next to me, whispered, Hey sis, let's go halves on mine. But I feel bad. I started, but she cut in. Don't sweat it. It's weird that you're the only one without any. I can't polish off this beast on my own anyway. I thanked her and was about to nick a slice of her beef when Julia hollered. Wait! What do you think you're doing? Nicole, you're still young and planning on kid number 2, right? You've gotta eat right, she said, stopping me from taking a bite out of Nicole's portion. But Julia, Molly's food is... Nicole tried to step in for me, but Julia cut her off. It's fine. Molly doesn't seem keen on having any kids, she retorted, a smirk plastered across her face as she gauged my reaction. Feeling bad for Nicole, who'd been dragged into this, I replied, I'm sorry, Nicole. I'm good, really. I appreciate the thought, though. Thanks a lot. As I said that, Nicole looked like she wanted to say something, pain flickering across her face, but I chose to ignore it and dug into my reheated mac and cheese. Even I could see how miserable I was looking, being the only one at this happy get-together stuck with mac and cheese. But hey, it's not like I was in any position to kick up a fuss. So I just bit the bullet and chowed down on the mac and cheese. Then it was time for the gift-giving bit with Lena. I'd managed to snag something she'd been itching to have, but as I went to hand it over to her, my husband Bill swoops in and takes it off me, giving it to Lena himself. And to make things worse, my mother-in-law was smirking at the whole scene. And here I was, the one who'd trekked to the store and put down the cash for the gift. Lena, however, responded with a heartfelt, "Thank you," and promptly ripped into the wrapping paper. The moment she caught sight of what was inside, she let out an excited, "Wow!" and rushed over to me. "Molly, this is what I said I wanted. You remembered. Thank you." My quick on her feet mother-in-law Julia jumped in though. "Lena, it wasn't Molly who bought that for you, it was Bill." "No way! I only told Aunt Molly that I wanted this. Uncle couldn't know that. Grandma, aren't you being weird?" Lena defended me, thanking me over and over again. I gotta say, her words were a real lifesaver. But not everyone was a fan, namely my husband and his mom. They'd been shooting daggers at me the entire time Lena was thanking me. While I was deep in conversation with Lena, Julia pipes up. Let's dig into the cake now. Molly, could you be a doll and carry it over? With a resigned sigh, I tell Lena, we'll pick up our chat later, and lug over the fancy cake dish, fork, and knife that Julia has singled out. The cake they brought out was a real beauty, straight from a famous bakery. Then, out of the blue, Bill pipes up.
Mom, I've got the cake,
he announces without even running it by me. Well, considering I got Lena's present, I suppose it's only fair that he chips in too. At least that's what I was thinking until my husband sidles up to me and whispers,
Can you front me? It turns out I forgot to bring cash today.
My first thought was, you've got to be kidding me. But what was done was done. Julia whispers the amount in my ear and I begrudgingly pull out my wallet and cough up the dough. Julia begins cutting the cake, handing out slices, one by one. Everyone ready for the cake? Dig in, she announces. And yet again, I had this sneaking suspicion, and yup, my piece was missing. Julia, Bill, Mike, Nicole, Lena, and Drew all had their pieces. The cake was cut into 6 equal parts. When Nicole, noticing my piece was AWOL, chimes in. Julia, there's no cake for Molly. Julia brushes it off with a dismissive, It's no big deal. She could stand to lose a few pounds, and it's a shame to cut up this perfectly sliced cake again. All this while chuckling. Nicole, feeling a bit awkward, looks down and murmurs, but I reassure her. It's all good. It's Lena's birthday after all. Enjoy without thinking twice about me. But honestly, I was at the end of my rope. I was dying to give Julia and Bill a piece of my mind, but I didn't want to sour the atmosphere on my niece's special day. However, I couldn't stomach being there a moment longer, so I quietly excused myself. I'm heading home a bit early, and left on my own. Did my husband offer to drive me home? Nope. Instead, he says,
I'm taking the car home so you can catch the bus.
So, like a good little wife, I hopped on the bus and headed home as instructed. A few hours later, Bill strolled in, clearly feeling on top of the world. My patience was threadbare by then, and I seriously demanded he do something about the day's drama. However, he shrugged it off with a laugh, saying,
You're too sensitive. You can't live your life like that.
I reminded him I'd been left out at the dinner and the cake. But he retorted,
Didn't my mother say she just made a few mistakes? It's just meat and cake. Don't say such pitiful things.
With that, he took himself off to our room, acting like I was the one being unreasonable. And that was the end of that conversation. My patience had always been my strong suit, but I was teetering on the edge. For the first time, I seriously contemplated divorce. I was starting to see our marriage was hanging by a thread. Fast forward a week later, I got an invite to a nearby fireworks festival. The invitees included my husband, Julia, Mike, Nicole, and Lena. Given the birthday fiasco, I wasn't too thrilled about hanging out with my husband and his mom, so I turned them down politely. However, I was told that Lena declared, I don't want to go unless Aunt Molly is with us. So, I grudgingly agreed to go. We planned to meet up a bit early before the fireworks kicked off to indulge in the food stalls. I wasn't really feeling hungry and was just surveying the place when Lena spotted a food stall and burst out, I want to eat chicken! So we trotted over to get her some. Suddenly, we were approached by a bunch of guys with cameras who asked,
Can we interview you?
They were live streaming the fireworks festival on a well-known news program that I was familiar with. They wanted to showcase our seemingly harmonious family. My husband, Julia, and even Mike gave the thumbs up, so the crew got started right away, aiming their questions at Lena, who was happily chomping on her fried chicken. When asked if she could polish off such a hefty chunk of chicken, she retorted, "I'm going to give the rest to my mom and Aunt Molly."
Mom and Aunt Molly?
Lena held my hand and replied to the reporter's question. "The other day was my birthday, but Aunt Molly couldn't eat any cake. Grandma always bullies Aunt Molly, so I decided to give it to her today," she said, a huge grin lighting up her face. The reporter awkwardly tried to switch gears, but Lena pressed on. "Grandma is mean. On my birthday, everyone had roast beef, but Aunt Molly only had mac and cheese. I thought it was really unfair." Hearing this, the TV crew decided to cut their losses and made a hasty exit, figuring it wasn't a good look to continue. Of course, Lena didn't mean any harm. She didn't really grasp the concept of live broadcasting and was just standing up for me. After the show aired, a torrent of messages poured in from viewers who had tuned in, berating Julia.
How can you make your daughter-in-law eat macaroni and cheese? That's the pits. Poor thing.
And, "I thought you had a good relationship with your daughter-in-law, but you were bullying her." In the end, Julia and my husband took an early exit, leaving me to thoroughly enjoy the fireworks festival with Lena and the rest of her family. A couple days later, I sat down for a chat with my husband and my mother-in-law. I voiced my intention to file for divorce. My husband pleaded with me to rethink, while Julia bellowed, "I will never allow a divorce." But Nicole and others were ready to testify, providing evidence of my mother-in-law's bullying and my husband's failure to step in. Upon hearing this, both of them blanched and hung their heads. "Bill, you live with her," I quipped, sporting a smile. "With your mother, who you love more than me. You are a mommy's boy after all." And with that, I bid adieu to my in-laws' house. Realizing that divorce was inevitable, my husband quickly conceded. The divorce process was surprisingly smooth, and I was soon officially free. Nowadays, I've got my own little spot in an apartment right near my office. It's a cozy place my brother used to call home. After the divorce, my ex found himself a bit strapped for cash, since I was the one footing 80% of the rent, and he wound up moving back in with his mom. Since all this went down, Lena's made it clear she doesn't want anything to do with Julia, and hasn't set foot in her grandparents' house. But hey, silver lining, I've kept up a pretty steady rapport with Lena's family, meeting up with them on the regular. "Let's celebrate my next birthday together too, Aunt Molly," Lena told me. Honestly, I'm already counting down the days to her next birthday.
Sarah, it's so scary.
Hey Sarah, unlike you, Amber is sensitive. You should be kind to her.
My husband was kind before we got married. But after we got married and my sister-in-law started coming to visit, he changed. My sister-in-law always makes me the bad guy and hides behind my husband. And my husband gets angry when I don't show love toward my sister-in-law. I was beginning to regret my marriage, as my mother-in-law was the same as my husband. I am Sarah, 32 years old. People around me urged me to get married, and I finally made it happen 6 months ago. I usually work for a company and live with my husband, Mason, who is 3 years older than me. I never really dreamed of getting married. In my department, I am the youngest, and most of the women are in their 40s, and they all spend a lot of time complaining about their husbands during breaks. Some are divorced, and some are single mothers who are having a difficult time. To me, marriage felt like a curse that would tie me down for life. So when Mason and I were dating, I didn't even hint that I wanted to get married. and it was just enough for me to go on a date occasionally. Because once you're married, you're going to see what you don't like about the other person, whether you like it or not. After about 3 months of marriage, feeling a bad vibe, and now that it has been 6 months, the thoughts of divorce was on my mind. The reason I started thinking about it was because Mason's sister, Amber, my sister-in-law. Mason and Amber are 7 years apart, and I think she is 28 now. My in-laws and Mason must have loved or spoiled Amber a lot. She's quite the spoiled brat. Mason had bragged about having a cute little sister many times since we were dating. But I just thought he simply loved his sister at that time. And it never occurred to me that he was attached to his sister. But I think I saw a glimpse of it during our wedding greetings. Even though we were to talk about our marriage, my mother-in-law kept talking about Amber. You know, Amber loves her older brother and a very sweet girl. If you have a fight with Mason, you should call Amber. She'll solve it right away. Mason nodded his head in agreement with his mother, and for some reason, he looked very proud. Amber looked a little embarrassed, but when my mother-in-law praised her, she smiled happily. My father-in-law looked ashamed and bewildered, but seemed to just let it happen. I thought to myself that she must have been the youngest and most spoiled child in the family. I thought that when I got married, I would live separately from my in-laws, and that I would inevitably be separated from Amber as well. However, I was wrong. Amber used to come to our house once every 2 weeks when we first got married. But the frequency of her visits has increased to once every 3 days now. She always came when Mason was home and say, "Mason!" and hugs Mason like a child. He would pat her head gently and said,
Oh, Amber, you can't help it, can you? I'm married now, so no more for you.
He says no, but he doesn't mean it. When I look at them with wide eyes, Amber shows tears in her eyes and gives Mason a frightened look. "Sarah, it's so scary."
Hey, Sarah, unlike you, Amber is sensitive. You should be kind to her.
Mason has become a different person since we got married. Where is the kind Mason he used to be? Especially when Amber is involved. He becomes nervous, like a mother cat protecting her child. Even though I thought that my marriage was a failure, I had to live with my husband's relationship with his sister because it was not a valid reason for divorce. Amber's outbursts became more serious. I manage Mason's and my salary and give him an allowance of $500 a month. I also have an allowance of $500 for myself to keep it equal. But one day, Amber suddenly said, "Mason, I got fired from my job." I don't know how Amber is behaving at work, but it is probably Amber who is at fault. It's obvious from her private life that she hasn't been taking her work seriously, and I feel sorry for the company that hired her.
What? I'm gonna go and complain to them then. Hey, Sarah, we'll have to sue them for unfair dismissal.
But Mason doesn't share my opinion. He wants to bring me into this and drive that poor company even further into the ground. Amber, do you even know why you were fired? Something about how all the guys were nice to me, but all the female seniors were mean to me. And a bunch of them went to their bosses, saying that they will quit because of me. Amber said with tears in her eyes, and Mason became even more furious.
Why would they make such a lovely girl to go through such a thing? I'm going to go directly to those bosses and have them fired.
Amber looked happy, but I sighed and said, "Don't do it. For all I know, Amber must have done something wrong. Why can't you make a reasonable decision when your sister is involved?" Then Mason started to get angry at me.
You're just like those seniors. Amber is in pain and suffering, and you're trying to spread her wounds.
You are now like Amber's sister. You should be aware of that. I may have become Amber's sister-in-law, but that doesn't mean I should treat her like a child. If you force me, don't forget that I'll consider divorce. I gave him the cold shoulder the whole time. I'm hoping Mason will get mad and say that he would like a divorce. Then one day, my father-in-law decided to go overseas for 6 months due to his work. My mother-in-law, who gets along well with her husband, decided to leave Amber at their house while they were away. There was an idea behind this, that leaving Amber to live alone for 6 months will encourage her to become more independent. It was my father-in-law who initiated the idea. My mother-in-law, who has the same thoughts as Mason, would never have approved of such a plan. Before my in-laws went overseas, my father-in-law contacted me.
Actually, it's about Amber. I've always felt that my wife and Mason have always loved her and spoiled her a little too much. No matter what I said, I couldn't say anything strong enough when the three of them blamed me, as they felt sorry for Amber. But if we don't do something, Amber will be ruined. If Amber can live on her own while we are abroad and pay for utilities, she'll understand that the world is a tough place.
I nodded in agreement with my father-in-law. Yes, Amber has been spending all of her salary on luxuries, buying only luxury brand items, and I think she has no control of her finances. If she has to live on her own or gets married, I think she will be the one who will have a hard time.
I think you're right. I've told Amber to get a job, even if it was a part-time job, and just pay for the utilities. We'll pay the first payment, since the two of us have been using it together, but after that I want to change the payment name to Amber, and have her pay it herself, and be aware of the fact that she is an adult. But I think Amber will turn to Mason if she's in trouble. I would like him to be tough to her if possible, but I don't think Mason can do that. But if you say something harsh to her, I can see Mason getting angry. If you are in any way uncomfortable, you are welcome to go back to your parents' house.
My father-in-law asked me very politely. I thought this might be a good opportunity to repair my relationship with Mason. And if it doesn't work out, I decided to consider divorce. As soon as my in-laws went overseas, Amber came crying to Mason, just as I thought she would. Mason, I can't afford to pay the utilities. Please help me. Mason was astonished and called out to me.
Hey, Sarah, you should pay for her. You're in charge of the family finances.
What? I can't do that. Why should we pay for the 2 household utilities? Besides, your father is trying to get Amber to learn financial skills by having her pay for her living expenses, right? If we help her, it'll be meaningless.
You know what? Amber is cute and she's going to marry a rich guy. Amber doesn't need financial skills. That has always been too hard on Amber. He's the one who's wrong.
I was too dumbfounded to say anything. My values are too different from theirs. I felt like maybe I could understand people from other cultures better than them. We're from the same country and speak the same language, but if we can't reason with each other, it's not worth talking about anything anymore. With this in mind, I stopped saying anything about Amber from then on. Whether Amber came over to Mason's house every day and was spoiled, or whether she gradually brought her belongings into the house and started living in Mason's room, I decided to ignore them and live by myself. In other words, I started doing only my share of the housework. Then Mason started getting angry.
Why don't you do the chores? You're out of your mind. Cute Amber is having a hard time.
No, I'm the one who is having a hard time. You're so busy with Amber that you don't do your share of housework anymore. Amber doesn't even look for a job. She just lounges around all day and asks for an allowance. How old is Amber? She's not a child. She was a working adult until she got fired, right? It's you who is ruining Amber. You're spoiling her so much that you're turning her into a child who can't do anything. I was so angry that I blurted out the truth, what I had been feeling for a while now. But just as I thought, that logic doesn't work with Mason.
Why not? Amber doesn't have to do anything.
Unlike you, she's pretty insensitive.
Then maybe you should marry Amber.
Talking to Mason is not constructive. I spoke softly to Amber, the source of the problem. Hey, Amber, do you know it's gonna be hard for you? I hope you find a husband who is willing to support you as an old jobless woman. Maybe a rich guy, and somebody like Mason? But the reality is, there's no one like that. And you are the one who will have it hard. I agreed with your father. And I want you to be independent. If you want to stay with us, you're going to have to pay for staying here. If you don't want to do that, then you will have to do all the housework. If you don't want to do that, then go back to your parents' place. You have to be able to earn your own money, at least for utilities. And if you want us to help you, we'll help you at least a little. The only person who can say no to this and no to that are children who are in that kind of phase. Don't you understand that you've been troubling me all along? I said with a smile. But Amber started crying and went to hug Mason again. Mason is constantly berating me and preventing Amber from being independent. After that, I decided to live my life, ignoring these siblings. 2 months after my in-laws went overseas, I received a payment slip for water and utility bills. The mailing name was in Amber's name, but the address was ours. I put them on a table and left them there. I even received a notice that the water supply would stop if the payment is not made. My parents-in-law's house is probably without electricity or gas. After a while, the water supply will be shut off too. It's not mine, so whatever. I decided to ignore everything and leave Amber to my in-laws when they come back. I thought this would make my mother-in-law understand what was the problem. After that, I tried to visit my friend's house as much as possible because Mason and I would fight whenever we saw each other. When I talked to the senior staff at work, they supported me and said that they will be there whenever I'll have to get a divorce. They told me that I should make a record of conversations and that I should keep a diary, which I immediately decided to do. And now it's been 6 months since my in-laws went overseas. The day they returned home was a holiday, and Mason and Amber had gone somewhere, so I was home alone for the first time in a while. Just after noon, the doorbell rang at the apartment. It was my mother-in-law with a furious look on her face. I had a bad feeling about this as I sent her up to her room.
Amber told me that you promised to pay her utilities until she found a job. I can't believe you ignored that and didn't pay at all. When we came home tired after a long trip, I couldn't believe there was no electricity or water.
Are you harassing us? My mother-in-law is just like Mason. I sighed and explained the situation. Amber was staying with us. She was always been very attached to Mason. And even when we were at work, she was always hanging around the house. She doesn't do any housework. She doesn't pay any nursing fees. So why should we have to pay for your utilities? I thought I said the right thing. But of course, my mother-in-law didn't understand.
You know Amber is our princess, right? Why are you being so hard on her? Like her father. She's sensitive and fragile, and we have to protect her.
Is that being a good mother? It means you didn't try to raise your daughter to be a decent adult from the beginning, right? It's Amber who will be in trouble later. If you are a parent, don't you think you should be tough on her now?
What do you know about us?
Just as my mother-in-law and I were arguing, Mason and Amber came home. Now it's 3 against 1. I was able to leave from my parents' house with the bag I had packed earlier when the doorbell rang. I answered the intercom to find my father-in-law standing there. When I let him in, the first thing he did was to scold Amber.
What the hell did you think you were doing? Your mother told me everything. I heard that you had been staying at your brother's and causing trouble for Sarah.
Then it was my mother-in-law who responded, "No, that's not true. Amber couldn't find a job and asked Mason for help. But Sarah gave her a cold shoulder and didn't want to help at all. Mason took pity on Amber and at least let her stay at home. Sarah said she would pay the utilities, but she didn't. The electricity and water were cut off because of Sarah." I hurried to correct her story. "Oh no, that's completely false. I never said I was going to pay it. Yes, the utility bills did arrive at my house, but I put it on the table in front of the sofa, where Amber always lounges, so that she can easily find it. And I told her to pay it properly." I grabbed my voice recorder and played back the words I had said to Amber a while back. Of course, it included Mason's insane statements. Amber crying to Mason after I had told her this, and Mason berating me. It was my father-in-law who was furious.
You guys, I knew you were troubling Sarah. Sarah has been so politely admonishing Amber, and you guys just kept blaming Sarah. I don't understand why you were wrong.
But my mother-in-law, Mason, and Amber don't seem to give a damn about what my father-in-law says to them. My father-in-law must have been annoyed by those three for a long time. He would sigh deeply with a sad face. So I made a suggestion. Should I have someone else listen to this audio and have them tell me what they think of it to get a third-party perspective? If they got upset here, it means that they knew it was their fault while they were putting the blame on me. But my mother-in-law's eyes lit up. That's a great idea. Then let's send it to our relatives and let them make a decision. Mason was nodding his head in agreement, and Amber was also happy about the idea. I was so surprised at their attitude that I wondered if my relatives were thinking the same way as my mother-in-law and Mason. But my father-in-law smiled gently to reassure me, and I relaxed a little. To the end, no matter who I asked, all they had to say was that they blamed my mother-in-law. But still, my mother-in-law refused to give up her opinion. So my father-in-law contacted my mother-in-law's mother. My mother-in-law didn't want this and was avoiding my grandmother-in-law, but my father-in-law insisted. She clearly sounded disappointed as we talked to her over the phone.
You've always been too protective of Amber. Haven't I told you many times in the past? Nothing good can come from spoiling a child. I know I was too hard on you. And because of that, you thought you would raise her nicely, but what good is that? If she doesn't turn out to be a decent adult, I'll re-educate her from the ground up, so you can send Amber over to me.
My grandmother-in-law finally gave her a stern talking to, and my mother-in-law couldn't seem to resist, so they were to leave Amber at her house for a while. Mason was still not convinced, and I had long since given up on him. I want a divorce after all. What you've done and said may not be grounds for divorce, but they were grounds enough for divorce for me. I don't want you in my life again, I told Mason. Mason started yelling and complaining to me. So I told him that it would be better for both of us if we got a divorce. So we went to the city office together and filed the divorce papers. My parents were very opposed to me getting a divorce. They ambushed me in front of my office and tried to persuade me to reconsider. I told my company about the situation, and they transferred me to a new position. And I started living alone far away from my parents' house. My parents occasionally contacted me, recommending to get back together with Mason. But they were not worried about me. They just don't want people to look at them with a jaundiced eye because they have a divorced single daughter over 30 years old. If they really cared about me, wouldn't they be sympathetic to me after having my life ruined by a sister-spoiling man? Thus, I try to not contact my parents as much as possible and protect my private life. Marriage is not just about you and the person you love. It also involves other in-laws. If so, I want to live freely. If I find someone I want to spend the rest of my life with, I would probably get married again. even if it means I would have to bear the burden of my in-laws. I am now concentrating on my work and leading a more fulfilling life than I did before my divorce.
I forgive you, so come back to me.
This foolish guy was talking condescendingly to me. What's his problem? I won't forgive this jerk who threw me into the depths of hell. My name is Lydia. I am an ordinary 44-year-old housemaker. I'm busy with house chores every day, and I'm satisfied with my life. My husband Jason and I have been married for almost 20 years. Looking back, a lot has happened in our marriage. The time my father-in-law passed away right after our wedding, and all the errands I had to run for his funeral. When I struggled to find the best way to communicate with the demanding mother-in-law. And then building a house and going through fertility treatments. We never had children. Of course we wanted to, and we tried hard. However, both of us had infertility issues, and the storks never came to us. After having numerous discussions, we decided to be happy with the two of us. I would be lying if I said I didn't feel lonely, but I had my husband. He alone was a source of my emotional support for me.
I'm home. What's for dinner tonight?
We're having salmon steaks. I found some fresh fish on sale.
Whoa, they look delicious.
He said at the dining table.
Amazing. Your food is the best.
Really? I'm glad.
Oh, I'm so glad we got married.
He looked really satisfied. I was glad I married him too. He made me feel fulfilled.
Oh, by the way, one of my colleagues just had his third child.
As I was clearing the table, he casually mentioned it. Oh, okay. We have to get a baby gift then.
Thanks for taking care of it as always.
That's okay. It's what a wife is supposed to do. At that time, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but he may have already started to change without me noticing. One day,
I'm invited to a sip and see party at my colleague's house. It's this weekend.
Nice. It'll be fun. Don't drink too much, okay?
I know.
I sent him off that day. It was my first day off alone in a long time. Once the chores were done, I contemplated what to do next. I started to get ready, thinking about catching a movie by myself. Then my phone suddenly came alive. Hello, Lydia? Is Jason with you? The caller was my mother-in-law. Hi, Beth. He's out right now. Oh, was he? He went to a sip and see party at his colleagues. She was silent after my reply. Then she let out a heavy sigh before she spoke.
You know, Lydia, I don't want to say too much about this, but Jason is frustrated.
About what?
He can't have a child on his own, and yet he's celebrating the birth of the friend's child. He's such a kind man, so you should be attentive and listen to whatever he says to you. Understood?
The call was abruptly and violently hung up. I wondered what the purpose of her call was. We never had a good relationship from the beginning. The final straw was our choice not to have children.
Having kids is what truly counts if you are a woman, right? I can't believe it. What did you marry my son for?
Such things were said to me. Jason and I were both responsible for the problem, so it was not my fault alone. She just didn't want to admit that our son was infertile. Oh dear. Thankfully, she only calls me once in a while and never came over. The call, too, only happened once a month or so. I just had to put up with it and move on. I didn't stress over it and took it in a more laid-back way. I'm back. It was around 7 p.m. when Jason, who probably had a lot to drink, came home. Hey honey, you must be quite tipsy. Well, he was usually in a good mood when he got drunk, but he seemed to be in a strange mood that night. He was in low spirits, or perhaps he was thinking about something. I offered him a glass of water while he sat quietly on the sofa. Are you okay?
Thank you.
He took it and drank it down in one gulp.
I saw the baby. He's so cute.
Oh, that's great. To be honest, I have yet to get used to him talking about kids. We wanted to have one, but we couldn't have one. Every time I faced reality, I felt the prickle of pain from the thorn that was still stuck in my chest.
I wonder if there's still hope.
He slurred. What do you mean? By the time I managed to squeeze out a few words, he was already passed out on the sofa. I wondered what he meant. Maybe he meant that he wanted to have a child. All kinds of thoughts were going through my head. It must have been just a temporary thought, seeing the baby up close. I taught myself not to take drunken nonsense seriously. I tried to keep myself calm. On the contrary, Jason began to change from that day on. Hey, I made your favorite dinner tonight. Pork chop.
Whatever.
Usually, he would be overjoyed, but he was indifferent. I figured he was tired from work. At times like that, it was best to give him some space. I kept quiet and observed. After a while, hey honey, I want to go shopping this weekend, so can you drive me?
Why? You're just gonna waste money on the gas. Take a bus.
But it'll be hard to carry heavy things by myself.
Such a hassle.
He had never talked to me like that before. I was bewildered by the drastic change.
Ew. Dinner is disgusting tonight. You're a housewife. Clean the house better. Don't talk to me.
He became someone who spoke like that. I worried that he was suffering from some kind of illness. A brain tumor could have caused a change of personality. I considered taking him to the hospital. But just then, he dropped a bomb on me.
You want a divorce? Yeah, I want to restart my life.
But why? All of a sudden?
It's actually not sudden for me. I've been thinking about it for a long time. I'll be 42 this year. It's not too late for me.
What's not too late?
Why don't you get it? It's the last chance for me to have my own child. You can't give birth anymore. So it's too late for you. I still have a chance.
He then gestured to Beth, whom he had called in advance, to sit down beside him. She added her voice in agreement with them.
You know, I wonder if you understand your position. Why don't you just step aside?
I was infertile, so they didn't want me anymore. They were throwing me away. When I grasped that, I felt like I was dropped into the abyss. I sat in silence, unable to say anything, unable to wipe off the tears that were flowing. Beth had a look of triumph on her face. She probably didn't want a daughter-in-law who couldn't bear children from the beginning. I'm going to find a young and beautiful wife for him. She's going to have many kids. It would have been better if he had pointed out my inadequacies. Then I had room for improvement. There was absolutely nothing I could have done about the child. I had no choice but to agree to the divorce. I couldn't understand. I believed that we had been a happy couple. I had made up my mind to support and love Jason for the rest of my life. It was just my own self-indulgence. I felt empty and devastated and could only shed tears uncontrollably.
Just think of it as a final act of kindness and agree with the divorce, please.
Kindness? Surely if he wanted children, it would have been kind to leave him.
Or are you going to ruin my life because of your selfishness?
Selfishness? I reluctantly agreed to a divorce. The look of satisfaction on Beth's face made me feel like my heart had been gouged even more. And then Jason mercilessly kicked me out. After 20 years of marriage, it was such a cruel treatment. My parents were terribly worried about me as I became a zombie after the separation. The feeling of being betrayed and abandoned by someone I loved wasn't going away. I cried day in and day out. Maybe I was going back to my old life the next day. Maybe Jason was coming to tell me that it was all a lie. I was hoping for nothing but that. One day, my friend Macy came to see me out of worry. Lydia, don't throw your life away for a man like that. You've been a good wife all your life. She was one of the few friends I kept in touch with after I got married. She was a strong and kind woman who always praised and encouraged me. She knew how to cheer me up. You know, there are as many men in the world as there are stars in space. If you don't find happiness, I won't forgive you. She helped me regain my strength little by little. Before I got married, I worked as an accountant. Although I had a gap of about 20 years, I was able to get a job through Macy's connection. Thankfully, I continued to study and obtain qualifications during my marriage, which paid off. Working and talking to someone distracted me. I started enjoying every day of my life. All of that was thanks to Macy. My parents were relieved to see me back on my feet. 5 years had passed since then. On my way home from work, I ran into someone from my past.
Long time no see.
Excuse me, but do I know you?
How nice of you. It's me. How could you forget?
I wondered what he wanted with me after all those years. He even had his mother beside him. Are you stalking me?
I had no choice. I don't know where you live or work. I thought if I walked around in your parents' neighborhood, I might see you.
It was certainly creepy. So, what can I do for you?
I've got something good to tell you.
He's so kind, you know.
You should be grateful to him.
My ex-mother-in-law's grin was also creeping me out. I checked the time on my watch. Sorry, I'm in a hurry.
I told you I've got something good to tell you. So listen to me. Let's go to that cafe over there.
I was somehow forced to follow them.
You can come back to me.
Jason suddenly blurted out something inexplicable, but with all smiles besides him. I was confused, trying to figure out what kind of a prank they were pulling.
You cried so much and refused to divorce me back then. I thought about it a lot. I can't leave you alone, you poor thing. Come back to me.
I almost burst out laughing hearing his comment. No, don't laugh now. I managed to cover it up by hanging my head down. They mistook my reaction as I was relishing in my happiness and carried on with the conversation.
I've been thinking about you for the last 5 years. You must be the same about me. I'm sure you miss me.
He's been thinking about you ever since the divorce. He waited for you without remarrying. So he couldn't remarry after all. When you come back, I'll have something for you to do. So don't worry. It'll be easier for you to get back into the rhythm again. Apparently, this was the main concern. I showed my keen interest and asked, what is it that you want me to do? My mother-in-law, Jason's grandma, is in need of nursing care. She has dementia, and it's been a lot of work. Ah, I got it. That's why.
Come back soon. I love you.
I was at my wit's end and burst out laughing. They looked at me with their eyes wide open.
Are you that happy?
Well then, Lydia, you can come back with us today.
You too. Please.
Keep your jokes between yourselves. I looked down at them coldly. Why would anyone go back to being a slave now? It's not that you didn't remarry by choice, but you simply couldn't, right? What makes you think that I still love you? After such a horrible divorce, have at least some decency without being complete idiots. I put some cash on my coffee on the table and turned to leave the cafe. Then a girl came inside. I'm back. The girl jumped into my chest. Hey, Amy, sweetie. What are you doing here? I saw you from my side. The little girl was chirping away. Jason and Beth were looking at us, stunned. Mom, what's for dinner today? I don't know. Meatloaf? Yay, I love meatloaf. Jason looked at me and Amy alternately, his lips trembling.
Mom? What's happening? Are you remarried?
Yes, but oh, you didn't know? Indeed, they didn't. I never took the trouble to inform them. I asked my friends and family not to say anything about me, so they probably didn't get the information.
This can't be true. You were so reluctant to leave me.
Jason covered his head with his hands and kept mumbling, No. You know, how many years ago are we talking about? It's been 5 years. Of course I'm married again. I asked Amy to wait by the cashier and stepped closer to Jason. But I'm glad you came to visit me. I've been wanting to tell you something. I'm grateful for the divorce. It allowed me to meet a wonderful guy and raise a child. Thank you for divorcing me back then, I told him with a big smile. His face at that moment was so pale, and it was comical to watch his mouth moving like a fish out of water. Seeing that, I felt my 5 years of resentment was blown away all at once. Soon after our divorce, Beth had run around to remarry Jason, but she couldn't find a young girl who wanted to marry an over 40 with a beard gut old man. Well, even if he had been younger, it would have been tough as long as the mother-in-law came along. She called on her acquaintances and registered with a matchmaker, but without success. They both had planned to remarry right away, but were shocked to find out the reality. Then his grandmother developed dementia. That was when Beth must have gotten the idea of bringing me back. Seriously? Morons. Why did they even think that I was still waiting for him after 5 years? I'm very happy now. I have a sweet husband and a beautiful 7-year-old daughter. I met him through Macy, and we started going out. We hit it off exchanging our divorce stories and ended up getting married. I wasn't sure if I would be able to get along with Amy at first. It's been almost 4 years since. We've built a truly amazing relationship as a mother and daughter. There may be difficulties in the future. I will continue to protect her no matter what it takes. It doesn't matter if we are blood related or not. Amy is my one and only daughter.